Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I want to let you know at the start that this webinar is being recorded, as many have expressed an interest but are unable to join us today. But before we get started, I think it is critically important to take a moment to acknowledge the anger, grief, and frustration that many are feeling right now regarding the recent murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd. This is a very painful time in our country, and we are at a place where we should stop and consider what role we plan to play in calling out injustice and creating change in our systems. With that said, good morning again. I am Jessica Godfrey, Social Action Coordinator for the North Georgia United Methodist Women. This webinar is a collaboration with United Methodist Women and Project Transformation North Georgia. Our initial plan was a face-to-face event in early May, but due to COVID-19, we had to cancel. But we also realized with schools shutting down in mid-March and school systems now in the midst of developing strategies as to when and how they will reopen, we felt it even more critical to move forward in addressing the summer reading slide and its importance and impact on the school to prison pipeline. One of the goals of this webinar is to bring in awareness of what the school to prison pipeline is and how social and emotional learning, or SEL, can serve to disrupt this practice. To give you a little background on these two groups, United Methodist Women has been working for almost 150 years to improve the lives of women, children, and youth by challenging social injustice through service and advocacy. Project Transformation North Georgia works to improve literacy and the social, emotional, and spiritual development of children from low-income neighborhoods. You will hear more about Project Transformation later during the forum. We have a lot of information to share, so you may want to grab a pen and paper for notes. If you have questions, you may type those in the Q&A panel. We have set aside time towards the end of the presentations to answer as many of your questions as we can within our time limits. Before we get to the presentations, however, I want to welcome and thank our 6 fantastic panelists who are advocates in their own rights for the well-being of children and families. I also want to thank Emily Jones, United Methodist Women Executive for Racial Justice, Alana Walls, United Methodist Women Distant Learning Coordinator, as well as this phenomenal team of women who are dedicated to bringing justice and mercy to a hurting world and who helped to bring this webinar to fruition. Finally, but most importantly, I want to thank each of you for taking the time to join us in this very important conversation. In this meeting today, we have parents and teachers, we have school administrators, school board members, faith leaders, community leaders, United Methodist Women, United Methodist Men, and a host of potential advocates. We are here today because children matter. We are here today to fight for our children because school should lead to meaningful, productive lives for our children and not to prison cells. Before we end, we will share with you how you may help in this fight. At this time, we will hear a word of prayer from Cynthia Holland, a member of the School to Prison Pipeline team.
Good morning. Can we pray? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful day that you have allowed us to see. Thank you for keeping us safe with all the things that are going on in this world today. We thank you for all that you have done and will do for us. And we pray for peace throughout this world and for the families of those who have suffered any loss due to this pandemic, job losses, or just plain old racism and hatred. God, we pray that for each presenter and for each participant, as we learn more about the school to prison pipeline and what we can do individually and collectively. We pray for our leaders and lawmakers so that they can discern what is right and that your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us open hearts and minds to receive what you have for us today. May we be motivated to love and action and to help make sure that every child has equal learning opportunities and will not be judged by their skin color or social status. But most of all, God, knit us together that we be one with each other and one with you. I thank you for all those who have worked behind the scenes to put this webinar together. And we pray, God, now that the words of our mouth and the meditations of our hearts will be acceptable in your sight as we go forth. God, just give us more of you in our lives. And most of all, we pray for peace throughout this world, God. God, we know that we can do everything with you, but without you, we can do nothing. So be with us as we go forth. Amen.
Amen. And thank you, Cynthia. Mr. Dana Smith, who was to discuss the school to prison pipeline, has a family emergency and was unable to be with us this morning. In his place is the very capable Pamela Perkins Carn, co-convener for End Mass Incarceration Georgia Network, or EMI. EMI's action statement reads, in order to break the cycle of generational criminal and juvenile justice involvement, there must be an intentional, collective investment in schools, communities, and appropriate supportive services for children and adults to ensure that all children and families can succeed. Pamela is a speaker, educator, advocate, and proponent for children's rights. Welcome, Pamela.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm trying to get my keyboard to unmute myself. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having us here. As Jessica said, my name is Pamela Perkins Carn, and I'm a co-convener of the End Mass Incarceration Georgia Network. And next slide, please. And as Jessica has already read to you our action statement, we will move on into the subject matter. Next slide. School to prison pipeline. Back one, please. There we are. Thank you. The school to prison pipeline defined. What is the school to prison pipeline? We've heard this phrase being uttered in different areas and different environments. And so what does it mean? And the basic understanding and basic definition for school to prison pipeline is the funneling of our children from the public school system into the juvenile and criminal justice systems. And in part, this is due to a number of reasons, a number of aspects contribute to the school to prison pipeline. Zero tolerance school discipline policies, the disproportionate application of student suspensions, high stakes testing, administrative practices, and we will actually touch on each one of these within our short time with you. This is one of those topics that can take all day or a couple of days to discuss, but what we just want to do is to give you a brief overview of the school to prison pipeline. The most adversely affected children by the pipeline, children of color, children in poverty, poor children, children of low income, children with learning disabilities or learning differences, and more recently, our emerging LGBTQI students. And there may be a couple of letters I'm missing in there, but understand that this is an emerging population of children who are being pushed out of the public school system and out of the educational setting. However, overall, the most adversely affected population is African American males across the board. And this is in totality. And they also, African American males also comprise the majority of our juvenile justice system, especially in Georgia. Next, please. Trends are created because they call the school to prison pipeline a trend of push out, a trend of funneling. But trends are created. And this didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen in a vacuum. The school to prison pipeline just didn't pop up. It was nurtured and it was groomed, but there's a history before the advent of school to prison pipeline that created the environment for it to exist. And so by this trend being created, the public, that's us, we're primed for an expected and acceptable outcome. Next slide, please. So how was this trend created? This trend of push out, this trend of punishment, this trend of non-restorative justice. 50 years ago, this is when it started, at least for this particular trend. It started some 50 years ago when President Nixon became, Richard Nixon became president. In 1971, he declared drug abuse as public enemy #1. Now, what does this have to do with school to prison pipeline? Two of the national incidents that are more often referred to and talked about as the primary contributors for the push towards get tough discipline and zero tolerance, the War on Drugs initiative, and the Columbine school shooting incident in 1999. So with the War on Drugs being declared more than 50 years ago, we started this trend for get tough punishment, non-restorative justice. We're just gonna fast forward. We won't go through the whole timeline. We'll fast forward to 1980 to 1997 that you see on the screen. The mandatory minimums disproportionately affect minorities, and that's the advent of those mandatory minimums, where you go from a 50,000 population incarcerated to 400,000 within this time span. And in 1999, fast forward, you have the shooting at Columbine by 2 students, and you have the proliferation of zero tolerance at schools. You have the implementation the proliferation, because the implementation of school resource officers was already in place. You had the proliferation of school police, of actual police, police from the departments, the local city police or the local county police, then patrolling our school systems. And zero tolerance became disruptive behavior and threats of violence rather than actual violence, rather than actual criminal activity, became watered down to if a child is acting out. And so when we look at our timeline and we see that in 2015, 16, and fast forward to today, we've had laws and policies put into place that in Georgia, 15,000 pre-K through 3rd graders were given out of school suspension. So that's that level. It's gotten so large that now at the pre-K level, we are removing our children from the learning environment for disruptive behavior or for other, which is the highest category that's checked on the discipline chart. So what does other mean? We don't know. So in 2020, fast forward to today, even as we try to implement restorative justice, even as we try to implement criminal justice reform, juvenile justice reform, we still have popular legislation that criminalizes children. This particular bill, House Bill 994, provided for at least 33 new offenses, all gang-related, to be applied to children so that they could be automatically charged as adults. So thankfully, that part was addressed, that part was removed, but it's still in existence, and it did pass the House, and it will be, and it now sits in the Senate. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So what does this criminalization of children look like on the school to prison pipeline? It's not for boys only. Yes, Black boys are suspended 3 times more than white boys, but Black girls are suspended 6 times more than white girls. In Georgia, 57% of the children who received referral to law enforcement were Black boys. 62.5% of the children who received referrals to law enforcement were Black girls. This is in Georgia. In Georgia, 65.5% of the children who received out of school suspension was Black boys. 73.9%, almost 74%, who received out of school suspension were Black girls. So yes, it's not for boys only. Black girls in Georgia are at a higher rate of receiving out of school suspension and referrals to law enforcement. And this is 2015-16 data offered by the Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Education. Next slide, please. So here's the story of Celicia Johnson, who made national news. Her arrest, handcuffing and arrest, made national news out of Milledgeville, Georgia. She was actually handcuffed and removed from the school building, placed in a police car, and taken down to the police department. She was 6 years old. The story is that she was throwing a tantrum. And so why would we handcuff a child who's throwing a tantrum at 6 years old? Next slide, please. These were the responses to Celicia's incident on Facebook. And this was 4 months later, after the family had gone through some harassment and they were trying to move. One of the statements is, this whole story was a waste of airtime. They wanted the media involved. You got what you asked for. Now everybody knows how bad your child is. Get over it. Next slide, please. Welcome to a godless world. Take God out and the devil takes over, point blank. Not only is this the criminalization of a child, it's the dehumanization of a child. Next slide, please. So this story from April surfaced again today because the TV station chose to revisit the child, see how she's doing 4 months later. This child, who was behaving like a Tasmanian devil, destroying school property, ripping things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, but no one has yet to offer what they should have done. The child was out of control, could not be calmed down. If they had done nothing and she was the one to be injured, then everyone would be on the case for doing nothing. She's compared to a Tasmanian devil. Next slide, please. Best believe if my kid is that bad, I'll be the one saying cuff him. Next slide, please. So, not only do we criminalize our children, we dehumanize them. If for whatever reason that was going on within the school system, that this child was not having a good day. But let's look at the numbers. So again, back to the civil rights data collection for out-of-school suspensions by race and ethnicity. As you can see, Black or African American children far more receive out-of-school suspension far more than any other category of children. And so out of the 126,308 children in Georgia who were given out-of-school suspension, which is a phenomenal number in and of itself, 84,000 of them were Black children. Next slide, please. That's a 66.92% of the population of children who were given out-of-school suspension. So were Black children. Next slide, please. Referrals to law enforcement, again, just want to show this on a graph. Out of the almost 6,000 students who were referred to law enforcement, which again is a phenomenal number of children, almost 3,400 of them were Black children. That's in Georgia. Next slide, please.
Pam, about 1 more minute.
Okay. That's 57.5% of the children. Next slide, please. So zero tolerance school discipline policies. That's one of the contributing factors to this. And as you can see it on the slide, we won't read all of those, but what this has led to is an increasing reliance on the presence of police officers, metal detectors, and other paramilitary type of actions and equipment on school campuses. Next slide, please. Some of the alternatives to zero tolerance school policies would be positive behavior interventions and supports, which the Georgia Department of Education has been advocating. It's free training for all school systems, but school systems are not required to implement PBIS. They have to approach the Georgia DOE for its implementation. Next slide, please. The disproportionate application of student suspensions is another factor. And what we can do as an alternative is to stop this, to start looking at the social emotional development of children and to really put in, provide the supportive services such as counselors, support groups, mediators, et cetera, that children need. Next slide. High stakes testing. We all remember some of the court cases that have taken place over high stakes testing. What do we need to do? We need to stop our reliance on high stakes testing as the end factor as to determine what is accomplishment, what is achievement. So we need to encourage schools to keep students in the learning environment and develop enriched curricula that are engaging and intellectually challenging, to be culturally sensitive, be culturally adaptive to our student population. Next slide, please. And administrative practices. School board appropriation disparity. When you have, where are our funds going? Are our funds going to providing more teachers, more qualified teachers, better services, support services within the school, extensive professional development, supplies, equipment, the things that the children need in order to succeed? Next slide, please. And so when school districts spend the funds to meet the needs of the children, if we the differentiation of resources according to student need, rather than a cookie cutter application, it will provide for better educational outcomes for students in predominantly low income and high needs school systems. Just know, Georgia is a majority, minority, and low income public school system. We have to adapt, we have to adopt the practices that would apply most successfully to our population of children and their families. Next slide. Thank you so much. These are some of the other organizations with whom we work with and support, and who have been on the front lines of School to Prison Pipeline. Gwinnett SCOP, which is a parent coalition, and they really work at a local level and have influence at the national level as well. The Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities has a concentrated project on looking at the effects of the School to Prison Pipeline on children who are identified as students with disabilities. And Georgia Appleseed actually has a manual for parents and others on the School to Prison Pipeline and how to successfully navigate tribunals and other types of formal programs within the school system that actually can remove children from school and ultimately impact their ability to receive an education. Thank you so much, and hopefully I didn't get the red flag. Okay.
Thank you so much, Pamela. That was a lot of information, as you said. It could take a full day and 2 or 3 days just to cover all the aspects of the School to Prison Pipeline, but I hope that you understand better what it is. But now that you understand a little bit better about the School to Prison Pipeline, we have SEL, or social and emotional learning experts, who will share now as to how SEL can be effective in disrupting the pipeline. First, Dr. Kristen J. Carruthers is an Atlanta-based clinical psychologist licensed in Georgia and New York. She has expertise in cognitive behavior therapy, behavioral consultation, and intervention. In addition to providing psychotherapeutic interventions, Dr. Carruthers has extensive experience consulting with schools and providing interventions for teachers, students, and parents in school settings. Dr. Carruthers.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to admit that right now, my own emotional reactivity is a little heightened. So what happens when people have been exposed to information that can be distressing or disturbing, or they're having an experience that reminds them of the traumas, they may notice what we call somatic symptoms. So right now my heart is beating fast, and one of the reasons that it's doing so is because I've worked extensively in schools in Georgia and New York and in Illinois, and these numbers are particularly disturbing within the current political climate. The other thing is, I should also note that I am a forensic psychologist for juveniles for the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. So I am one of the psychologists who evaluates children who've been put out of school because they've engaged in some type of behavior, and they've been arrested by the police. And the judge on their case has ordered what's called a behavioral health evaluation or competency to stand trial evaluation. I'm one of the people that conducts those evaluations, and as part of them, I do IQ tests, I do personality tests, and I get an extensive history and information about what happened in the situation to lead to the children's arrest. The children that I evaluate are disproportionately members of underrepresented groups, and my goal in that job is to explain to judges and to attorneys what could possibly be happening in multiple contexts that led this kid to be before them in court. With that, I'll go on and start on what could happen in our schools to improve relationships between teachers, children, and administrative staff. Next slide, please. So socio-emotional learning, this graph that you see here is from CASEL, and CASEL is the organization that is responsible for lots of the research and development that's gone into socio-emotional learning curriculum. And so I know that you all can read the slides on your own, but socio-emotional learning curricula are designed to improve children's abilities to cope, to manage their emotions effectively, and to self-regulate. And within that framework, there are 5 major areas. So there's self-awareness, self-management, your social awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. I want you to know that social-emotional learning should not occur in isolation. These are practices that should be woven throughout the curriculum and throughout the school day. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so why socio-emotional learning? What are the benefits of socio-emotional learning? Well, if we think about the timeline that was presented from the last presenter, the thought is, okay, if we have children who are presenting to school and they may have some difficulty with emotion regulation, or they haven't been taught specific coping skills, or when they get into the classroom setting, if they've been exposed to violence or other traumatic stressors, they may not know necessarily how to deal with things when they get into the classroom setting. Can we specifically teach them the skills that they need to learn to be able to exist within the classroom setting? So the research behind social-emotional learning has showed that participation in this type of curriculum has led to increased academic achievement, improved behavior in the classroom, and there's a strong return on investment, okay? So over an economic return of $11 for every $1 that's been invested. Next slide, please. So if we think about a timeline in terms of like federal policies related to socio-emotional learning curriculum, in 2015, there was the Every Student Succeeds Act, and most of these acts are bipartisan initiatives to introduce the ability for teachers to be able to provide social-emotional learning supports in the classroom, or for teachers to receive that same support and administrative staff to receive support. So if we think about what's happening, if we've got zero tolerance policies, those zero tolerance policies are often in place because there is some level of ignorance or unwillingness to engage in how can we help our kids be better, rather than just pushing them off to jail if they exhibit a behavior. Have we considered that this kid may have a mood or emotional disorder? Have we considered that the teacher's level of reactivity could have also escalated the situation? Have teachers and administrators also considered what their backgrounds are and how their own exposures to trauma and their own beliefs or implicit biases may impact the way they deal with students of different backgrounds? And so these acts were specific moves by members of Congress to say, hey, we need to do something. We need to earmark some federal funds to make sure that we can put our money where our mouth is and not just say teach social-emotional learning curriculum, but here's how you can do it. Right now, there's a House Appropriations bill on the table, which would include $260 million worth of funding for socio-emotional learning. Next slide, please. Okay, so social-emotional learning practices are guided by the acronym SAFE. So the activities should be sequenced. That means we're going to start with small skills and stepwise progression and work our way up to mastery. We're going to connect the learning of these skills to activities to foster their development. The social emotional learning curriculum should be active and engaging, so that it helps kids want to master the new material and enjoy mastering the new material. It should be focused, so on developing personal and social skills. So many people may come into the school setting not knowing how to interact appropriately with others because they have only been with their families. And it's explicit, so it targets specific types of skills. And as we go on, I'll talk more about those. Next slide, please. Okay, so if we look at the different competencies, so back to that graph that I showed you initially, the first one was self-awareness. So how can you understand and identify your own emotions? Do you know the difference between a thought and a feeling? So as adults, we might say, I feel disrespected. No, you think someone is engaged in a disrespectful behavior and you feel angry. That's called affect identification and being able to link specific emotions to experiences. The next is social awareness. So being able to take perspective and understand other people's points of view and to have empathy as you do so. Responsible decision making is really important because it helps in terms of the delay of gratification and helping kids who may struggle with that ability. So kids who might have ADHD or difficulty attending learn over time. If I can focus on this task now, then I'll be able to do the thing that makes me excited later. Self-management, so also impulse control, being able to cope with difficult stressors without necessarily having a big upset reaction, or learning how to ask for permission to leave a classroom if they are feeling they're going to have an upset reaction. And then relationship skills. So do you even know how to make a friend and how to keep a friendship going? All of these skills are interrelated and necessary for kids to really understand social emotional learning and to get the most out of the curriculum. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so some of the specific strategies that you might see, I talked about feelings identification. That might just be a feeling charade game, which is something we do in therapy. So we'll have kids practice reading others' emotion, the emotion that's on their faces. For kids who've been through traumatic experiences, this can be very difficult. When you've been through trauma, sometimes your emotions are blunted and you may not know how to read your own emotion or read the emotions in others. Conflict resolution skills, so problem solving steps is a model that we use. So say what the problem is, tell how it makes you feel, evaluate different solutions, pick one, try it out, and see if it worked. I know I rattled that off quickly, but those are some of the evidence-based models that are used for conflict resolution. Classroom meetings, such as our morning meeting time, where we basically set the frame for what the day will include, can help kids who are anxious. Teamwork and team building through sports. So for children who don't typically see eye to eye, sports is an excellent way to get them to work together. Analyzing and discussing current and historical events. This is extremely important. I think we're now seeing why it's so important, but children as young as kindergarten can be taught about historical events. Cross-age mentoring would be having an 8th grader pair up with a 3rd grader to do some type of tutoring or activity. And then listening skills, so really practicing active listening and recall. Next slide, please. So when should schools or teachers seek out additional supports? Whenever we notice that, like I've said, trauma and loss a lot, but if you know that a family or a child has been through a traumatic stressor, if you see specific changes in mood or behavior, a kid who was once friendly and outgoing becomes withdrawn, moody, and irritable, that's a time when you might want to seek psychological support. Unnecessary or unexpected or unexplained decline in academic performance. A kid who was previously doing well isn't making progress, and vice versa. A kid that should be making progress is really struggling. That child may need a neuropsychological evaluation to determine if he or she has difficulties with executive functioning, which could then impact behavior. And the other area would be if a kid has consistent difficulty implementing practices that have been taught in the classroom or in the school related to social-emotional learning curriculum. They can't understand the strategies. There may be a speech or language issue, or that child may have some other issue that could be complicating their absorption of the material. Next slide, please. If you're looking for additional resources, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL's website is an excellent resource. For children with learning and attention problems, Understood for All is an excellent website that provides not only videos and information for parents, but toolkits about how to get an IEP done, or what needs to happen in the home setting. If a parent notices difficulties in behaviors, socio-emotional learning curriculum should occur across settings. So whatever the teacher is teaching in the classroom and whatever the school has implemented as a policy should also be something that parents are aware of and able to implement in their own homes. For psychological support, I would recommend the APA Division 53, which is the Society for Child and Adolescent Psychology. And another great resource, a website that has tons of resources on psychological issues for children and adolescents, is the Child Mind Institute website, which I've included here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, excellent perspective. So we really, really appreciate it. I'd like to ask our panelists, if you see questions, I see questions that are coming in the Q&A panel. If you can answer those questions as we go along, it would be much appreciated. So thanks for that. Now, did Dr. Rose Prejean Harris, did she join? Okay. Then next we will have Principal Benita Grant. Principal Grant is the principal for Fickett Elementary School in the Atlanta Public School System, and her school practices SEL. Principal Grant is skilled in educational leadership, youth empowerment, community outreach, educational technology, and organizational leadership. She has instituted a campaign at Fickett, which she coined the Big Four. RAM, reading comprehension, attendance, math, fact fluency, and positive behavior. In an open letter to parents and the community, she said, "I truly believe that all children have the potential to be anything they inspire to be with the help of solid and compassionate adults." During school year 2019, she and her staff were guided by the theme, "Together we can do this." Principal Grant.
Hello, everybody. Hello. And thank you so much for this opportunity to share some of our best practices. And I definitely want to say that I love the lineup because we had someone to talk about, Dr. Karn talked about statistics, and then we talked about just a clinical side of SEL. So I just want to go into the front line of what SEL looks like every day at our school. I am going to show a video. It's going to be on silent, but I am really big on just what SEL looks like and feels like in a school setting. So you'll see the video playing as I speak. You know, when I think about when people ask the question, how do you implement SEL, you know, in school? You know, when I think about the word implementation, it's a concerted effort to do something. SEL cannot be a concerted effort to do something. It has to be a part of who you are. It has to be what your climate and culture looks like on a day-to-day basis. So again, SEL is just who we are and what we do. From the time our students walk into the building every morning, I have my entire team, including myself, we're there. We're looking at their faces. We're looking to see who's upset. One thing that Dr. Carruthers mentioned as she was speaking, and she talked about a lot of times our kids go through so many things at home, right? And so they're coming to the school and they let it out. So if we have people that are on the front line right there at the door looking at our children as they pass through, then we can catch a lot of that. So again, it's important that we do that and not just stand there, but you know, when you think about SEL is modeling. How do you model for kids how to be good people? How do you model for kids how to be happy? How do you model for them? Because they're little people. You know, when you think about the words like self-awareness and being responsible, they just don't get that, right? They don't understand the definition of that. So you really have to model that and show that. After our kids enter the building, they go into their classrooms, but before they go into their classrooms, every teacher in my building understand the importance of introducing them and giving them that hug, making them feel warm and welcome before they enter the classroom. When our students come in late, our kids know to clap for them as they come in, because they can't help that their parents didn't get them up that morning to get them to school. Again, that's all a part of SEL. Also, you know, setting goals, right? Setting goals is really big at our school, and we have to be really intentional about that. So reading is a big, literacy is huge for me. You talked about RAMP. That is one of my main points that we make every day at our school. So our kids set daily goals for reading, and we have like this huge game room that they can come to after they've met their goals. But the biggest part about that is when you think about SEL, it's difficult to talk to kids about what it means to set goals, but it's easier to throw them into that scenario of wanting to reach and wanting to attain something to be rewarded. So we have a lot of rewards in our school as it relates to academics, and AR, which is Accelerated Reader, it's a reading program, is one of them. It just really gets kids excited, and they just get really fulfilled when they meet their goals with reading. So again, speaking about SEL, it's about how do you, what scenarios do you create? And that's something that we create for our students, is getting them to often set goals for themselves. Another thing that I think that my team do very well with, we teach our students, well, they learn by doing, right? And they can't experience something if they don't have an environment that's conducive to that. So the one thing that we do every morning after our kids come into classroom, we circle up. You know, we circle up. We have this circle up time where we're talking about what's happening, you know, in the community. You know, we're giving them different things to think about as it relates to what does it mean to be kind. We give them an opportunity to give shout outs to their teammates, to their students in the classroom. And it could be something as simple as, oh, I love the way you held your pencil. It could be anything, but again, it's teaching kids to learn how to give compliments and to be kind, and also to be cognizant when people are doing good, right? So those are the things that you would see in the morning time in our classrooms as it relates to circling up and getting the kids ready for the day. I remember when we first started SEL, and the biggest thing was, you know, oh, you know, it's one thing to do. No, it's the thing to do. And you can't do anything else until you can get at the heart of our children. And so that's just some of the things that we do. In addition to that, we teach our students self-management, right? And not just self-management for yourself, because I think a lot of times when you think about, you know, being selfish, it's because you're thinking about what's in it for me. But you have to create systems for students where not only do they have to think about themselves, but they have to think about their other friends too. So we have a house system. And with that house system, there's pillars to that house system. You know, being respectful, being kind, being responsible, those types of things. And when we catch students doing those things, they get points. But the biggest thing for me with the house system is, you know, what you do affects other people, good, bad, or indifferent. So now we're teaching little people who are 5 years old that, you know what, I can't walk out the line because then that's going to make it bad for the other students in my classroom. So again, those really big pillars of SEL, you can't just teach that. You have to throw them in experiences where they feel that and they have those experiences. So that's something that we do a lot. We create scenarios for our students where they are learning to experience how to be good citizens and how to be good friends and things of that nature. I remember just a quick story here. We had a student to come in, and he was disabled. He had to walk with a wheelchair, and I'm always concerned about, you know, how kids perceive other students when they're different. But I felt like we had done enough with our culture and climate that it just wouldn't be a problem, but I just wasn't sure. Well, anyway, I was walking down the hallway, and this kid had a wheelchair, and I noticed that the other kids were behind him, rolling him down the hallway, and the kid was just having such a good time. But what that showed me was not only did they understand it was a difference, but I'm going to make you feel comfortable. I'm going to make you feel comfortable in this space. And that's who we are. That's who FICIT is. And I think it really aligns to social and emotional learning. It's not what we do, it's who we are. Parents in the community, our parents, you know, we're constantly communicating with them, and we are not communicating the bad things that happen. That's like, I wouldn't answer the phone either if every time you call me it's something bad. So we're constantly communicating and really trying to engage our parents so that they can be a part of the school community and give their input and feel like they are a part of what we're trying to do at FICIT. So that's a big thing. Someone talked about earlier about suspensions. I'm not a proponent of suspending kids. It doesn't make sense for me. And it doesn't solve anything. Students need to be in school. If you create systems and if you create an environment that is conducive to every kid in your school, suspensions, you don't need suspensions. Now, will there be issues and problems? Absolutely, but you have to understand how to deal with those things. And social and emotional learning, again, is how we deal with those issues that our kids face. So the three things that I would definitely ask the community to definitely help us to do, the one thing is volunteering. You gotta volunteer at your local schools. I mean, you have to do that. You have to give your time. And it's not always about money or funding. It's about just the time that you give. They need to see the examples. Kids cannot be what they don't see. So you have to definitely commit to giving your time. Also, I would definitely say for the community, you know, it's one thing to show kids that, oh, this is easy and life is gonna be great. No, show them how to lean in to discomfort. You gotta lean into discomfort. That's where the true resilience is. That's where kids understand how to be better people when they are uncomfortable. We think about what's happening in our world today. Our kids need to understand how to deal with those pressures. So leaning into discomfort and communication. You know, continue to communicate. Continue to converse with your kids at home. Come out to the schools and communicate with our students. They just wanna be heard. They just want to be heard. So again, social and emotional learning on the front line is simply for me about love, how you treat kids, how you treat your parents, how you treat your teachers. It's just about love, doing everything out of love.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Y'all, that enthusiasm and passion that you hear from Principal Grant, I and many of us at my church, Ben Hill United Methodist, have witnessed firsthand. She is passionate. She loves those kids, and it's always evident. So thank you so much for all you're doing. Thank you, Principal Grant.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Kylie.
Thank you. Did Dr. Prejean Harris, did she join yet? Okay, we'll pray that everything is okay with her. So now that you've heard about social and emotional learning and school to prison pipeline, our next two presenters will pull it all together by sharing how Project Transformation North Georgia is focused on disrupting the pipeline by using SEL with the children that they serve. Mrs. Diane Ward is a graduate of the Candler School of Theology with the Master of Divinity. Before attending seminary, she went to the University of Texas at Arlington, where she built her own degree, focused on nonprofit management with concentrations in business, social work, and communications. Diane began her career with Project Transformation in 2013 as a youth intern in North Texas. She fell in love with the ministry work of Project Transformation and now serves as Executive Director for Project Transformation North Georgia. You will also hear from Mrs. Dee Swoop. She's a literacy advocate who volunteers with Project Transformation North Georgia. Mrs. Swoop became a member of Project Transformation family through her great-granddaughter, who attended summer camp last summer. She has a passion for helping young people stay on the straight and narrow path. She also has a passion to care for the elderly. Mrs. Swoop has served her community by working as a nurse, educator, and faithful member of her church, where she leads several ministries. Dee, as she likes to be called, is a mother of 4, grandmother of 6, great-grandmother of 3, and a wife to a great husband. First, you will hear from Diane, and then Ms. Dee.
Good morning. Project Transformation is a nationwide nonprofit that works to transform communities by engaging children, college-age young adults, and in churches, sorry about that, in purposeful relationships. We envision a world rooted in love that pursues the equity of all people and amplifies God's call on every life. As Jessica introduced me, my name is Diane Ward, and I'm the founder and executive director of Project Transformation here in North Georgia. I'm thrilled to be with you today as a learner and a listener. I've learned so much today, and I hope you have as well. And I'd like to talk a little bit and share with you about the niche in which we at Project Transformation work to interrupt the school-to-prison pipeline. You might have heard it said that the prison system can predict how many prison cells to build based on third-grade reading scores. This has proven to be mostly an urban myth, but the line between literacy and children in prison is such a clear line, it's something many experts say could be true. Studies show that 74% of third graders who read poorly still struggle in 9th grade. And third grade reading scores can predict a student's likelihood to graduate high school. The Literacy Project Foundation research shows that 75% of the prison population is illiterate. Let me be clear, and as you've already heard today, there are many things that contribute to this pipeline, and literacy is just one of the contributing factors. But there are certainly, this is one of the many contributing factors to a systemically racist structure of our education system that's leading children into prison cells. At Project Transformation, we address a symptom of this systematic injustice. That symptom is the summer reading slide. We work to prevent the summer reading slide for children in low-income communities. The summer reading slide is kind of exactly what it sounds like, where kids dip in their reading scores from the time that they leave school in May to the time that they go back to school in August. And unfortunately, this year, it looks like from when they went home in March to when they're able to go back to school instead. And this is being called the COVID slide. Children in low-income communities, based on research, says that they won't catch up during the school year like their more affluent peers. And so that summer learning loss becomes accumulative, summer after summer, to where they aren't reading on level, and oftentimes don't read on a third grade level by the time they graduate high school, unless there's intervention or systemic change. So what's so special about third grade? Third grade is the shift from reading to learn to learning to read. I'll say that again. Third grade is the shift from reading to learn and learning to read. One simple example of this is how math changes from number problems to word problems. And so reading is integrated on all subjects to where you're reading to also learn. And you'll see on your screen 2 of the schools we work closely with here at Project Transformation. We have a site next to Stone Mountain Elementary School, and Stone Mountain Elementary School is in the bottom 5% of all Title I schools here in the state of Georgia. Only 21% of their third graders are reading on level. That's 79% of their third graders that aren't reading on level. At Ison Springs Elementary, which is next to our site in Sandy Springs, similar statistic, 35% of their third graders are reading on level, and that's 65% that are not. But I'm happy to tell you that at Project Transformation, we're really good at addressing this. Last summer at Project Transformation North Georgia, 100% of our regularly attending children maintained or improved their reading. And on a nationwide scope, 97% of our regularly attending children maintained or improved their reading, therefore successfully preventing the summer reading slide. I'm not ashamed to brag about this because it's a good thing. How are we so successful? Well, we're engaging children, college-age young adults, and churches in purposeful relationships through an 8-week summer day camp focused on literacy, but it's built on these social emotional learning strategies that Dr. Carruthers shared with us. Every day, kids get 40 minutes of one-on-one reading with a volunteer. In addition to the summer long that they're spending with the same young adults, building positive and meaningful and impactful relationships with young adults that look like them and talk about their college experiences and talk about helping children achieve their goals and talking with them about their dreams and what they can be. Because we believe that putting kids in a summer camp engaged in positive and energetic relationships, we are able to support them and hold them accountable because we know that they're valuable human beings who can succeed. Most of our parents don't know that social emotional learning is integrated into camp. They know we focus on reading. They know that we do fun activities, but most of them don't know about SEL, which is a growing edge, I admit. Last summer, several parents came to us saying, yeah, this reading thing is great, but I've seen a behavioral change in my child. I've seen an improvement in the ways in which they act in their everyday life. I've seen a change in their confidence and their ability to express how they feel. So how does that happen? How does that social emotional learning happen at camp? Well, we have a lot of what the Principal Grant just talked about, where we're integrating opening and closing circles. We celebrate the little things. I love how at Fickett Elementary they clap when kids when they enter the classroom. And these are all strategies that we use as well, integrated into camp to support our children. Here at Project Transformation North Georgia, this is only our second summer, and it's a different summer at that. We've had to change camp to be virtual this year, where we're still offering 9 weeks of camp. We're offering food and literacy and book supplies, while also offering virtual online engagement with our kids. We have 2 sites. We have one in Stone Mountain at Stone Mountain United Methodist Church. We have another site at North Springs United Methodist in Sandy Springs, Georgia. And we do hope to grow one day. COVID has put a little bit of a pause on what it looks like to grow for us. But we're eager to have conversations with the community about what it would look like to expand our program and ministry to other parts of greater Atlanta. I love what we do at Project Transformation, but I don't just want us to intervene. I don't want to have to treat just the system of a systematic injustice. Sometimes we talk about on staff, what are we doing to work ourselves out of a job? And don't hear me wrong, I love my job and I love what I do, but what would it look like if this was no longer needed? Because the systems and structures supported children enough to where they weren't falling behind and they weren't entering that pipeline due to literacy. We're not doing everything. We only cover a piece of this. We can do more. We're learning and listening about how we can do more. So thank you for learning alongside us. I'll share a little bit later about ways that you can get involved in the volunteer. But for now, I'd like to introduce you to Miss Swope.
Well, hello there. all I can say is, wow, this has been so informative today to hear from all of our panel that has spoken in regards to our children. And these are our children that we need to be focused on. It is about their future. I have always been a person that has been more generational mindset, looking into the future of other children that God has placed in my life, even those who are just there for a short period of time. And my experience with the Project Transformation, having my great-granddaughter to attend last summer, was an amazing time for her because she comes from a single parent family that her mother worked so hard and to make sure that the basic needs are met for her. And she has no other brothers or sisters to play with, so she has always had me. I am her Gigi, as she calls me. And one of the things that I saw with the Project Transformation that was such a wonderful thing for her was the interaction with the group that attended with her, all from the, I believe, kindergarten going into the first grade, all the way up to the sixth grade level, which was wonderful. The interaction, she learned so much of how to get along with others because she is a child all by herself. So this really helped her to know that it is so fun to have other children to play with, to talk with, to just be with. The program itself helped her to do so much more of growing, of sharing, how to be patient and listen and taking her turn at things. Sometimes, you know, when a child is all alone all the time, it's just them, and with the grown-up, they mainly get their way from the grown-up. But this program helped her to know, I am just one person and there are others around me, and to be friendly with them and to be accepted of them. They accepting her, she accepting them, and being able to have those relationships that meant so much to her. Her reading level really improved. She was just beginning to read, and during the summer, you know, children more or less want to play, but this program that she was in Monday through Friday helped her to be focused on reading in a playful and enjoyable manner that she picked it up so quickly. And I just thank God for that, because I know, in working with children all my life through, that this is an area that is of concern. They're reading and reading well enough to understand and comprehend what they are reading. And my thing is, as I have been walking through with different children, that parents have to be more involved in being able to, number one, with the child, what their need is a parent's time. Time for them to be able to listen to their child. Time to be spent with them making memories with their child. Reading a book is actually a memory that will never fade away, no longer as the child grows. Those memories last a lifetime. The storybooks that you would read to them helps them to understand, and that's that bonding time that you get with them. I have gone through, this is my third generation of working with my family, and I tell you that all children are different, but they all have one need that is universal, and that is your love. Your love and your attention goes so far, so far. And I just encourage my parents, we are their future, they are our future, so we must invest in them, and it is our time. Volunteering taking your time to go to a school, taking your time to be in a summer program, taking your time to read a storybook to children. And sometimes during the summer, I know COVID-19 has really stopped a lot of things we can do with our children, other children that are not in our families. But when we get through this pandemic, my prayer is that we will be more aware and more cognitive of the children that is in our midst, and to reach out to those children, making a relationship with them, getting to know who they are, listening to what they have to say. It's not always about us telling them something. Take time to let them tell you something.
Yeah.
It makes a big difference in their lives when it comes time to who they can turn to talk to be with, to have understanding and acceptance from. So we adults have a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be used to help our children to have a bright, bright future.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Dee and Diane. I got to tell you personally, I volunteered with Transformation last summer. And as Dr. Carruthers said, and Principal Grant, just showing the kids love, acknowledging them, looking them in the eye, letting them know that they are special and that they can do this, it just made a world of difference for me. And I hope it did for the kids as well. Panelists, we want to thank you so very much. This has been extremely informative. We have time, about 5 minutes, Stephanie, to answer some of the questions. I see that some have been answered already in the Q&A panel, but if we have some questions that we need to address, we have about 5 minutes to do that.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. And thank you, panelists. I can't even tell you how much I've learned in the short time that we've had together. Some of the questions that I could not answer, and maybe the panelists will be able to answer, so if you could please unmute yourselves. I guess one of the questions is, why was SEL removed from Gainesville Middle School when its previous principal pushed this during her tenure? While we may not know the exact circumstances of why that happened in Gainesville Middle School, maybe that can be addressed on a larger scale. Does anyone know why SEL would not be permitted?
Stephanie, this is Jessica. So maybe we can get in touch with Dr. Prejean Harris to answer that. She was previously a principal in Gainesville, and so she may be able to answer that question for us. So let us hold on to that one and reach out to her.
This one is for Pamela. I guess some of the data that she showed, the question is, how is this data normalized to the number of Black, white, disabilities, et cetera, in schools?
Okay, and I'm guessing you mean by the percentage of out-of-school suspensions or referrals to law enforcement.
Yeah.
Okay. What we have found is that regardless of, and one thing I do want to do when you're talking really fast about numbers, your words you can miss a couple of words. I just want to clarify that the females is the percentage of females and the males is the percentage of males. So, and so I think I'm talking really fast and calling out numbers, and I think I skipped over a couple of words of saying this is percentage of females, this percentage of males against males, females against females. But what we have found is that regardless of the makeup of the school, the composition of the school, whether it's ethnicity, race, children of color are disproportionately given this out-of-school suspension, are disproportionately caught in the pipeline. So the children with disabilities are also disproportionately represented. And that's another category of children, like I said, that the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities is looking into as to the disproportionality of both children who are identified with students with disabilities, as well as students with disabilities of color. And they are overly represented. So there's a disproportionate representation, then there's an over-representation when you have more than one of those factors that a child represents.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And Stephanie, I'm sorry, let me interrupt you. I did not realize the time is drawing near. It is 11:12 according to my watch, and I don't want to take people over. So panelists, if you can take a look at the Q&A in the Q&A panel, and if you can answer it for us, then that would be great. And then we can share the question and answers when we send out the information via email to all of our attendees. I hope that will work for you. Okay, thank you. Because we do want to get to our next steps. Diane.
Yes, and Jessica, I'd like to also address one of the questions when I talk about this because it relates. There was a question about, I can read it. Oh, I lost it. Hold on. It sounds like with some of the volunteer programs and volunteer requests that you were trying to match up people and kids of similar races. Is there a way that someone who might not be the same race can volunteer in a positive way? And I would say absolutely. A short story from last summer, I had a parent, a Black great-grandmother say to me, this is great. And we had all Black children at this site last year, and by the end of the summer, we had all Black interns. And the great-grandmother said to me, this is great, but I was hoping for more diversity for my child at this camp. And so, which was a great word. And so absolutely, it's important to have representation, but it's also important to have diversity because we live in a diverse world. And so I think that's important for children to have positive role models of all different demographics and all parts of diversity. And so what that looks like this summer with Project Transformation North Georgia, this is our link that you can sign up for this summer and future summers. We use a platform called Give Pulse. And this summer we're offering, you can volunteer to read virtually with kids. This opportunity requires a background check. Once you sign up, I send you an email with clear instructions on how to get that completed. And that happens at 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. Monday through Thursday, starting this week. And it's not just reading, but it's also social emotional learning circles integrated into this virtual part with our kids all summer. The other major opportunity this summer is to volunteer at our distribution site. You can find the details on there, but one of the most important things about that is because due to the pandemic, you have to be between the ages of 18 and 64. In a normal summer, we pride ourselves that anyone of any age can read with a child as young as 13 and up to our oldest volunteer, who's 93 and usually reads with us every day. In a normal summer, you can read one-on-one with kids or provide meals for our young adult intern community. Other opportunities that were already mentioned, but I'd like to highlight some more, are mentoring a child at a school in your community, attending our follow-up event in the fall. And so today's goal was to educate, provide opportunities for you to experience the impact that social emotional learning and literacy can make in the life of the child. But in the fall, we'll have a follow-up event centered around advocacy and policy change. You can also work with your local church or organization or individually to adopt a classroom or school, become involved with your local school board, and then continue to educate yourself about the school to prison pipeline and social emotional learning. Next slide, please. Also encouraging legislation that supports children, and visit the United Methodist Women Racial Justice page, but also volunteering with our other community partners such as In Mass Incarceration Georgia and Gwinnett Stop.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane. So it is now 11:17. I know we're past the hour, but this has just been extraordinary. So thank you to everyone. I want to thank these phenomenal panelists. Let's give them a virtual round of applause. And thanks to each of you, because we know even when we are apart, we can come together We can come together to learn, to love, and to advocate. The need is great, y'all. Take care, be safe, wear your mask, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.